Hey everyone, this is Kenny calling with Marathon Money Inside the Ticker. Man, it's great to have Greg on here. This is a copper company out in Canada. This is one of those things like I really want people to get involved in with the whole AI, data centers, energy, and he particularly have been in this space for a long time and already took a couple companies public and shares $6, $7, $12. But he probably can elaborate that more. His qualifications to really help this company grow as a CEO is probably going to be amazing, and definitely want to help him get more investors, to show more people to realize what hidden potential this company has. So I'll let you take it from here, Greg.
Thanks, Kenny. Real pleasure to be on and with you. Look, we're about to enter the biggest mining boom the world's ever seen. So it's a good time for, your viewers to be looking at this market. I think the setup is quite extraordinary. And look, I've been very fortunate over the years to have established a number of companies that you mentioned there, and been involved in, I think, 9 major discoveries now, some of which I've led the teams to. Some of those companies include NextGen Energy, where I was a founder, led the technical work initially there when we acquired the project. That's now a $7 billion company. We discovered the Arrow project in the Athabasca Basin. I then started ISO Energy and discovered the Hurricane deposit, which is the highest grade deposit ever discovered in uranium in the Athabasca Basin. That's now a $1 billion company. Skeena, I was the chairman there when we acquired the Eskay Creek project. That's now a $3 billion company. Vizsla Silver, that was one of my babies. We discovered the Panuco project in Mexico. That's now a $2.5 billion company on its way to $10 billion. So we've got a track record, I think, my team and I, of making some pretty serious discoveries.
How are you getting all these great discoveries? What is your process like?
Mate, look,
because with that kind of resume, you have an amazing resume. I'm pretty sure you're going to do amazing with this company. But what is your process?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I cut my teeth at Rio Tinto, the second biggest mining company in the world, from 1999 to 2007. So I was there for about 8 years. And, Rio Tinto had probably the best and most exploration team globally. They made some extraordinary discoveries over the years. And I was very fortunate to be involved in a couple of those. Major iron ore deposit called Wealth Under the Luna, which is a beauty, and Christmas Creek and Cloudbreak, actually, we discovered. I was just a junior geologist on the team then, but those assets we discovered are now the kernel, the main assets in Fortescue, FMG, which is about the 5th or 6th biggest mining company in the world. So, look, we've been blessed, and I learned a lot at Rio Tinto. There was a fellow there called David Klingner, who was the head of exploration, and he really planted in my brain this concept of assessing projects. And you can assess any business opportunity this way, but I assess exploration projects based on 3 key things: size of the prize, the cost of the test, and chance of success. If you focus on those things, and when I say size of the prize, the asset's got to be big enough, the mineral deposit big enough to justify spending a lot of your shareholders' funds on. So we do that. Cost of the test, you don't want to be drilling in really expensive parts of the world. You don't want to be drilling down below 1 kilometre or down to 1 mile deep. You want mineralisation close to the surface. And so you look for those types of deposits. And then chance of success really talks about the rocks in any given area. And if for example, if you're going to look for high-grade uranium deposits, go to the Athabasca Basin. If you're going to look for high-grade silver deposits, like we've got at Vizsla Silver there, one of the world's great silver deposits, highest grade thing discovered in recent years. We're in the middle of actually building the largest silver mine in the world at the moment at Vizsla Silver. You go to the Sierra Madre, you go to Mexico, where there's, I think, of the 14 billion ounce plus silver districts around the world, 10 of them are there in Mexico, and we've just found one ourselves. So, by sticking to that, you can do that. And that's what we're doing with Vizsla Copper. There's some major porphyry copper deposits in British Columbia. We've just discovered another one of those 2 months ago, the Thera deposit. I think that's going to be an extraordinarily large deposit, billions of tonnes type potential. A lot of work to do, a lot of drilling to do there. But if you're going to look for those big porphyry copper deposits, you go where they're most prolific, and that British Columbia belt is crucial. And then our acquisition last week of the Palmer project in Alaska, that area hosts some of the world's great VMS deposits. VMS being, of course, a style of mineralisation, often very, very high grade and often close to the surface, and that's what we've found there. We think we can grow that into a massive resource. But just nearby, there's a deposit called Windy Craggy on the Canadian side of the border. That's one of the greatest VMS deposits ever discovered. It's about 300 million tonnes at 2% copper. It's an extraordinary deposit, and we're only about 30 miles from that massive deposit. So there, what we've done, we've taken all of those concepts to give you an example. Size of the prize, okay, a VMS deposit, they can be very large, often sort of medium-sized deposits, however, but they can be very high grade, and that's what we've got here. Cost of the test, not too bad. We're only 40 kilometres from tidewater on that Pacific coast, which allows us access to all of those great markets. So it's an ideal location and not too expensive to explore there. And then the chance of success will very, very high. Because the deposit's been found. It's our job now to expand that deposit and make further discoveries around it. So it ticked all my boxes for an acquisition. And the other thing about it was very, very cheap. I honestly think we've bought something for $15 million that should have been worth $500 million. But because we've been in a massive market downturn for the past 10 years, the previous explorers couldn't raise the money, couldn't do the work to support that sort of valuation. Now we're seeing other companies with similar projects like Firefly. They have the Ming project here in Canada, but listed down in Australia. That's a $1.2 billion company. Foran has a project very similar to our Palmer deposit. It's now a $2 billion company. Well, we're, today about an $80 million company and heading in that direction fast over the next couple of years. So, the potential for extraordinary returns for shareholders by focusing on those things, size of the prize, cost of the test, chance of success, and acquiring the right type of assets is how you deliver for shareholders. And yeah, look, we've been very, very fortunate. We've done that consistently over the past 15 years.
Man, yeah, you definitely got like a large resume of success, man. Definitely when you took those companies to $1 billion, $7 billion, what do you see for next year for this company here? And, what possibilities that would open for you guys if the copper prices keep going up that us investors will be should be a part of?
Yeah, great question. I think what we're going to see, and you hint there at the copper market, I suppose what we're seeing, on the ground all the time, talking to investors, major institutional investors and brokers and bankers, is that we've seen that precious metals run over the past 18 months. Everyone's done fabulously well out of that. A lot of sort of 10 baggers have come out of that run. We haven't seen that quite yet in copper, but I can tell you that everyone's talking about copper at the moment. 2026 is going to be the year for copper. I think that we'll see probably sometime in the new year $10 per pound copper, but I think it's going to go to $30 a pound over the next 4 or 5 years, simply because we can't see a supply response coming in any way, shape or form. There just hasn't been enough work during that downturn for the last 10 years. So we're going to see an extraordinarily high copper price. And that's why we've focused our efforts here in North America on copper. For us, a huge amount of news flow. We'll complete this acquisition. We just raised $44 million. So that was an extraordinary outcome. Acquired the project for $15 million in stock, plus a couple of contingent payments behind that. But it's a very, very low cost acquisition. We've got our Thera discovery in British Columbia. We're drilling 500 metres at 0.4% copper equivalent was the best hit that we had there going back 2 months ago. We're going to continue to drill that. We can drill that year round. So we'll have a drill on the ground late January and news flow coming in February. But the main focus for us now is very much this Alaskan Palmer project. We won't be able to hit the ground until May next year. But when we do, look out, because we're going to demonstrate to the market the extremely high grade and large nature of this deposit. Some of the best drill hits that have been intercepted by previous explorers include those back in 2023. There were intercepts like 44 metres at 8.2% copper equivalent, 28 metres at 4% copper equivalent, 24 metres at 11% copper equivalent. So extraordinary high grades. So I just can't wait to get 2 or 3, probably 3 drill rigs out there come May next year, and then you're going to see an exciting amount of news flow from those high grade zones. And I think if you were to put out a drill hole like that, 40 metres at 8% copper equivalent in this market, our share price will double or triple overnight. We're going to be drilling in and out around those come May and June. So that's the main price. But along the way, a huge amount of news flow as we do all that work. I think we have an outstanding asset there. It's in such a tremendous location. Back in early this year, the new administration in the White House asked the governor of Alaska for a list of projects that he wants to see supported.
I was going to ask you about the Palmer project. Well, mention Alaska. I was about to ask you about the Palmer project in Alaska, but I do want to mention, when we last talked, which was a week and a half ago, the copper price was $4.30. It's at $5.07 now. It's slowly climbing up slowly. You might beat the projection of the $10. Like I told you before, I think copper is going to be at 30, but there is so much use for copper. So I with that project, that Palmer Alaska project, could that be a standalone mine? Is that very possible for that in the future?
Absolutely. Look, I think that is where it would head logically. We think that we can expand that resource very readily. A lot of holes to be drilled in and around those high-grade zones of mineralisation. So I think that will deliver for us. But, if you look at those 2 comps I mentioned, Firefly and Foran, multi-billion-dollar companies now, we've got the makings of those here. It's 17 million tonnes in a total resource at a little bit north of 3% copper. I've spent a lot of time speaking to geologists who've worked on this project over the years, including Darwin Green, who discovered it. And Darwin thinks that, absolutely this could be 50 million tonnes at those sorts of grades. Now, I think post this first drill season, it's got enough. It will be large enough to be a major project going forward. Very much a forward-looking statement there, but I think it has that potential. But in years to come, could this grow to being a world-class copper deposit? Absolutely. And the feedback we've got from people who've worked on it is that there's a lot of exploration upside there, a lot of low-hanging fruit. So we're just on the cusp of becoming getting the project to a stage where it is big enough to be a major new mining project. A lot of work to do to get beyond that, of course, but I think you're going to see it grow pretty dramatically now that we've got enough capital to get in and really hit it hard with the drill rig. So a lot of news flow, a lot of positive things to come out of it. It's going to be a major project. It's a tremendous location, tremendous project, and in a country now, in Alaska and the US, which is demanding, crying out for more critical minerals, and of course we've got a lot of those in this deposit.
Yeah, so I was wondering what the team looks like for you guys. I know you're kind of like the guy who's been at the top, and then now you're trying to take this company to the top as well. I'm looking at it from a standpoint, copper is growing fast in demand. So I am seeing that as a valuable extreme, but with the mass of demand that's coming with copper, what does your team look like as like COO, CFO, geologist? Who's on the team, and why is this team going to be the ones to take where you have taken it before? Or I know some people on your team who's with you at other companies that you have taken big, but is those same people around, or is this a new team?
No, we've still got the main Inventor Capital and Vizsla team on the ground here. It'll be worth coming back to the copper market as well, because of course we've seen over the last 6 weeks 7% of world supply taken out of the market due to mine failures and problems in various parts around the world. So, that's going to give an immediate kick on come early New Year to the copper price. But same team. So, firstly, as an advisor, my business partner Michael Connett's there. Michael's leading Vizsla Silver. Michael and I have had a few successes together over the years. Vizsla Silver is the most prominent of which is now a $2.5 billion company. We're in the midst of building the world's biggest silver mine. So Mike's important to what we're doing there. Very importantly, on the board, we've got Simon Smirlak. Simon's a partner at our Inventor Capital Group, but he's also the Chief Operating Officer of Vizsla Silver. He was at Ausenco Engineering, which is the largest independent EPCM or mine building and mill building contractor globally. He had over 3,000 people working for him there. He's built 43 mines around the world. So, we've got a tremendous development capability as well. And then beyond that, Steve Blower, my Vice President of Exploration, now Senior Vice President of Exploration. Steve was recently promoted. Steve and I have worked together for 10 years. He joined us at NextGen and then led the discovery of our Hurricane deposit at ISO Energy. He spent a long time working in the copper exploration business as well. So Steve's leading most of our exploration efforts. Keith Bodnarchuk, our Head of Corporate Development, an exceptional individual. He's been with me for 8 years now. We do a heck of a lot together, but he's been leading the corporate development initiatives, including this acquisition, and done a tremendous job there. We've got Dr. Chris Leslie on the team. Dr. Chris Leslie is one of, I think, probably the top 5 copper exploration geologists on the planet today. He's been working with us for 6 or 7 years now, an extraordinary guy. And then very importantly, with this acquisition, we had Peter Mercer join us, and Peter has been heading the Palmer Project exploration and development efforts for the past 3 years. Extraordinary guy, and he won't have any trouble getting these rigs out there and getting these targets tested when we can hit the ground come next spring. So I think
what I was going to say is that you have an amazing team. And there's another question that really popped in my head. That $42 million you guys raised was originally supposed to be $25 million. What made the significant difference from it go from 25 million to 42 million? Because that's very impressive from that. I know the demand for copper is significant, but what is investors that you got the money from thinking? What made them give basically 20 million more, almost 18 million more?
Yeah, it was an interesting one because, of course, if you go back to earlier this year, it was pretty hard for a junior copper company to raise much money at all. Now, fortunately, we were in a position where we could write big checks ourselves. I'd already put over $2 million into the company myself. I'm taking $2.5 million of this placement. My partners are coming in for about $6 million in total, myself and my partners included. So we put our money where our mouth is, and I think that helps engender investor interest in things. But really, the project speaks for itself. You don't see too many, there's really only a handful of projects like this left on the face of the planet with such high grades in such a good location. And as soon as people saw that, we were knocked down in the rush. I think we had over $60 million of orders in the book by the time we were done. We could certainly use that money over the next couple of years, but the intention here is to really take that money that we've got, continue our drilling at our giant Thera discovery here in British Columbia, and then have a very big budget for drilling up at Palmer mid-year. And so we can't use much more money than that right now. But that said, we had such strong interest from, Vizsla Copper until now, and I've done that with every company that I've been involved with, NextGen, Skeena, Vizsla Silver, ISO Energy. You go through a natural transition from really a retail owner-focused investor group to what we see with this is that we've got some of the world's major funds coming into the project and some really serious sort of smart high net worth individuals as well. Guys like David Lyle, Bob Disbrow, billionaire investors out of Canada that are really investing heavily in this. So they're seeing what we see, that this is a project that really hasn't been given the love that it needs, that hasn't had the financial backing that it needs, and the fact that, you've got a company like Firefly out there with a $1.2 billion valuation, Foran, admittedly a little bit more advanced than us, at a $2 billion valuation. Here we're an $80-90 million company. So they all see that potential for many times their original investment. And hence, and when those people come to you and that money's available, it's good, sticky money. They stay with us for a long time. We've seen that in all of my other companies. So you take that money and you do a very good job of stewarding that capital by putting it into as many drill holes in the ground as you can, and then advancing the project. So that's what we're doing here. It's not a template, but a fairly well-worn path for my partners and I and our group of companies.
It seems like a lot of things went your way in the last, 2 weeks with this $42 million, the Palmer acquisition, stuff like that. Is there going to be any more acquisition you guys going to be looking to in the future, but are you guys going to be strictly just focusing on the projects that you have and turning them commercial and making sure you get enough copper to supply North America?
This Palmer project gives us everything we need at the moment. There's a lot to go on with there. We need to drill it out and then commence studies. There's been some study work. So there's a lot of work to do to advance this project forward. That said, we continue to look at where we see value in the market. And I must say, the copper junior market hasn't really taken off yet. So there's still a lot of value to be had there by making the right kinds of acquisitions. I think that window is going to close early next year. I think we're going to see a much higher copper price. And given that all investors in the mining space have done very well out of this precious metals market over the past 12 months, a lot of those guys will be looking to invest in the copper junior market. So we're going to see a run up in copper juniors, generally and globally over the next year or so. And that will make acquisitions much more harder and more expensive. So, we're very happy with what we've got. We'll look, opportunistically and judiciously at anything else that comes along.
So what milestones that we should be looking out for from the first, second, third, or fourth quarter of next year? I know you have a lot going on in May. I know you said you had some announcements as well for the end of the year, but what should we as investors, as we start to buy more shares of your company, what should we be looking out for to say, okay, this is going the right direction?
Yeah, so look, of course, there's a lot going on in the background. We put out a news release from our Thera project last week that was, expanded the footprint of that system. We found a lot of copper at surface. So we think that there's, more news to come there. Of course, we've got the closing of this acquisition and financing that happens early December. And then come early in the new year, we're going to be putting at least one rig, possibly two drill rigs out on the Thera project to continue expanding that. I think we're a good chance of making further discoveries there. We've seen a lot of evidence of other porphyry systems on the ground. So look out for news flow come mid-January, all the way through the next few months as we drill that project out. And then look out for news flow from the Palmer project as we get into Q2 next year. We'll be gearing up to drill some of our targets there. So there'll be news about our plans for drilling, our targeting process, and then, come June, a lot of news flow from the project in terms of assays and drill results. And then that will lead into further study work at the back end of next year. I'd love to complete an economic assessment, a PEA, on this by late next year, early the following year, early 2027. And of course, we're perfectly funded now with $40 million in the bank that we can hit the ground really hard and do a heck of a lot of drilling. So, very, very strong news flow over the next couple of years.
No, I with everything going on with copper demand and everything going on with data center energy and all the stuff that copper is needed for, yeah, I feel. But since we're getting close to the end of the show, but I do want to ask you. So, what do you see price wise, copper? Where do you see that being?
Yeah, look, I think I must. So there's a few sort of cyclical things that happen in the copper market. December, you start to see restocking in China happening typically every December. So you usually through December see a pretty serious run up in copper prices. Of course, things go a little bit quiet towards the back end of the year with the Christmas holidays and things. But that China isn't impacted by that. They don't really slow down in terms of their buying until the Chinese New Year, which is in February. So I think we'll see a very strong run up. And once you've seen a failure of the block cave at Grasberg. You've seen a failure of the block cave at El Teniente. You've seen Robert Friedland's Kukula Kamoa go offline to some extent. We estimate that 6 to 7% of the world's copper supply has been taken out of the market over the past 6 weeks. That's only just starting to be reflected in prices. And it's not until you see those pools on the COMEX in Chicago, the LME in London, and then Shanghai copper supplies in bonded warehouses in Shanghai. We'll start to see those run down really seriously over the next month or two. And then you're going to see a very dramatic supply response. I wouldn't be surprised if, sometime next year we do see $10 per pound copper. But the thing I can tell you is that, last time round, from 1999 to 2009, the copper price went from mid 60 cents, 70 cents, all the way up to $4.60. So the metal price went up 6 times over the next 7 to 10 years. That was driven by a large but largely localised factor, and that was the urbanisation of a large chunk of the Chinese populace. This time around, copper demand is driven by data centre demand, particularly rewiring of grids wholesale for electrification at a global level. The demand driver is so much larger this time. It's a global phenomenon. But what's different this time around is that if you go back to the 2000s, you could permit a mine relatively quickly. Now that takes a heck of a lot longer to do. And we've gone through a 10, 11-year downturn where there hasn't been enough exploration work done. There hasn't been enough studies done. No capital's been available. Discoveries haven't been made. The rate of discovery globally has dropped phenomenally. So there's no way, particularly given permitting timelines now, that there can be a serious supply response coming to this crazy demand change that we're seeing. So hence, I think that we'll see $30 per pound copper by the back end of this decade. Copper's the right place to invest in this market.
Greg, thank you so much, man. I completely agree with you. I'm also, the more research I do, the more I realize how right you are with this copper play. And I hope you guys make it to the top like you've done for other companies. Besides that, thank you everyone for listening, watching. I appreciate. Please check out the Craig and his company. Definitely want to make sure like we put, this type of investment in mind, because obviously, as you can see, if you look at copper just from the beginning of November, the increase has been crazy, and the demand that's coming for it, he's absolutely right, it's there. So Craig, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Any last words you want to say before we get off?
No, look at our website there, Vizsla Copper. Tremendous opportunity. I think it's rare that you get to acquire such a phenomenal project for such a price. It bodes so very well for what we're doing, and your view there on copper and what's going to happen, I think, is spot on. 2026 going to be the year of copper. Get invested now before it's too late.
100%.